You are not imagining this. There is a very specific kind of frustration that only appears when something is genuinely close. Close enough to feel inevitable. Close enough to feel warm. Close enough to almost touch. It is the sensation of being aligned, prepared internally, synchronized, yet unable to cross the final threshold into full manifestation. Nothing feels fundamentally wrong, yet nothing fully arrives. The signs are there. The momentum is real, the effort has been sincere, and still the outcome hovers just out of reach. This is not failure. It is not a lack of worthiness. It is not proof that you did something incorrectly or missed a step. What you are experiencing is a precise threshold phenomenon. It has a structure, it has rules, and it has a name, the 91% quantum wall. This wall does not appear at the beginning of a journey. It does not appear when someone is confused, unprepared, or misaligned. It only appears after real work has been done. It only appears when the internal conditions are largely complete. That is why it feels so disorienting. You are not lost. You are not stuck in the traditional sense. You are paused at the edge of completion, and the pause feels unbearable precisely because it contradicts everything you have been taught about progress. You were told that if you keep pushing, keep focusing, keep refining, the result must eventually appear. You were told that effort compounds, that persistence guarantees payoff. And up to a point that was true. It is how you reached this stage. But the same strategy that carried you here cannot carry you through. The 91% quantum wall is where linear logic breaks down. It is where the rules quietly change without announcing themselves. And because the change is subtle, most people misinterpret what they are feeling. They assume exhaustion means they are weak. They assume frustration means resistance. They assume the endless stream of near misses, the almost job, the almost relationship, the almost breakthrough is evidence of bad luck or cosmic teasing. But these experiences are not mistakes. They are diagnostics. They are signals that the system has reached a critical threshold and is now responding differently to input. At this stage, exhaustion is not a sign that you should quit. It is a sign that you are applying force where force no longer works. The fatigue you feel is not ordinary tiredness. It is the weariness that comes from holding something in suspension for too long. It is the cost of maintaining intense focus on a reality that is already formed but not yet allowed to settle. Your system is tired because it is doing something unnatural, preventing completion while desperately wanting completion at the same time. The frustration has a similar function. It is not there to punish you. It is there to alert you that the feedback loop you are in has diminishing returns. Every additional push creates less movement. Every extra adjustment produces more tension. That is not because the goal is far away, but because it is too close for force to be effective. Precision, not intensity, is now required. Then there are the almosts, the synchronicities that line up perfectly and then dissolve at the last second. The doors that open just wide enough for you to see what is possible before closing again. These experiences are often interpreted as cruelty or tests. In reality, they are previews. They are evidence that the structure is already built in the background. The system is showing you samples of the finished state not to torment you, but to confirm that the blueprint is complete. The reason they hurt is because you are standing at the point where confirmation no longer requires effort. Only permission. This is why it is important to position you correctly from the beginning. You are not a beginner. You are not someone who needs to try harder, believe more, or fix some hidden flaw. You are someone who has already done the work required to reach alignment. You have invested attention, emotion, discipline, and time. You have learned to hold a coherent internal state. You have learned to sustain intention. The fact that you are experiencing the 91% wall is proof of competence, not deficiency. Incompetence never reaches this stage. What makes this wall so difficult is that the final requirement feels counterintuitive. Everything in your conditioning tells you that when something matters, you lean in. You monitor. You manage. You stay alert. You keep checking. And in most areas of life, that strategy works. But at this threshold, the mechanism is different. The system you are interacting with is no longer responding to effort. It is responding to release. This is where understanding the physics matters, not as abstract theory, but as a practical map. When you understand why more effort fails here, you stop blaming yourself. When you understand why release completes the shift, you stop fearing it. The 91% quantum wall exists because observation itself has an effect. Attention is not neutral. Focus is not passive. At earlier stages, attention shapes potential. At later stages, the same attention can lock that potential in place. The wall forms when a system is ready to change states but is being continuously monitored. The monitoring does not feel like sabotage from the inside. It feels like care. It feels like responsibility. It feels like commitment. But energetically, it communicates something very specific, not yet. Each check-in, each scan for evidence, each internal question of "is it here?" now reinforces the current state rather than allowing the transition to complete. The system interprets your attention as a request to remain stable, not a permission to change. This is why effort backfires at this stage. Effort increases observation. It tightens the grip. It amplifies the very signal that holds the process in suspension. And because you are so close, the resistance becomes palpable. The pressure builds. The contrast between where you are and where you know you could be becomes sharper. That contrast is what creates the sense of being stuck, even though everything is actually aligned. The promise of this understanding is simple but profound. Once you see the wall for what it is, you stop fighting it. Once you recognize the signals correctly, you stop misdiagnosing progress as failure. And once you understand the role of release, you stop confusing it with giving up. Release is not disengagement. It is not apathy. It is not lowering standards or abandoning desire. It is a specific operational shift withdrawing force so the system can do what it is already prepared to do. The final phase of manifestation is not an act of creation. Creation has already happened. It is an act of allowance. It is the moment where you trust the structure you built enough to stop holding it together with your own hands. That trust is not blind faith. It is informed confidence in the mechanics at work. This introduction is not meant to hype you or soothe you with vague reassurance. It is meant to reframe your position accurately. You are not behind. You are not blocked. You are at a threshold where a different rule applies. The discomfort you feel is not a signal to push harder, but an invitation to change technique. The wall is not an enemy. It is a marker. And once you understand why it exists, it stops being terrifying and starts being precise. The rest of this process is not about adding more. It is about subtracting the one thing that no longer serves unnecessary force. When that force is removed, what has been waiting does not need to be chased. It completes itself. At the heart of what you are experiencing is a principle that does not belong to psychology, motivation, or spirituality in the vague sense. It belongs to physics. It has been observed, tested, and replicated in laboratories. It is called the Quantum Zeno Effect. And in its simplest form, it states this: a quantum system that is continuously measured is prevented from changing its state. Not delayed, not slowed, prevented. In the quantum world, change does not happen the way it does in everyday intuition. A particle does not smoothly transition from one condition to another. Instead, it exists as a field of potential, a wave of possibilities. When conditions allow, that wave collapses into a single outcome. That collapse is what turns possibility into reality. But here is the crucial detail. The act of measuring a quantum system is not passive. Measurement is interaction. Observation applies pressure. And when that pressure is constant, the system cannot complete its transition. Imagine an unstable atom that left alone would naturally decay into a new state. This decay is not forced. It is probabilistic and spontaneous. But when scientists continuously measure the atom, repeatedly asking, in effect, has it changed yet, the decay stops. The atom remains frozen in its original state. The very act of checking for change becomes the mechanism that prevents change. This is not philosophy. It is not metaphor. It is a demonstrated physical effect, and it is precisely what happens at the final stage of manifestation in lived experience. Early in any process of creation or change, focus is essential. Attention shapes direction. Intention organizes potential. When you begin aligning toward a new outcome, whether it is a career shift, a relationship, a state of abundance, or an internal transformation, your focus acts like a sculptor. It brings form to something that was previously vague. At this stage, more focus helps, more clarity helps, more engagement accelerates alignment. This is why so much advice emphasizes visualization, repetition, emotional investment, and sustained attention. And for most of the journey, that advice works. But the Quantum Zeno Effect reveals a boundary where the rule changes. Once the system is largely organized, once the new state is coherent and ready to emerge, continuous observation stops being creative and starts being restrictive. The same attention that once shaped the wave now pins it in place. The system is no longer asking for definition. It is asking for permission to collapse. This is where lived experience mirrors the laboratory exactly. At the final stage, people begin to check constantly. They look for confirmation. They monitor signals. They scan their environment for evidence that the change has arrived. On the surface, this feels reasonable. It feels responsible. It feels like commitment, but energetically it functions as measurement. Each check is a subtle question. Has it happened yet? And embedded in that question is an assumption, not yet. That assumption matters. It communicates to the system that the current state must be preserved long enough to be measured again. The reality remains in potential, not because it is weak, but because it is being held there. Anticipation plays the same role. Anticipation is not neutral excitement. It is forward-leaning attention. It is consciousness reaching into the future and pulling information back into the present before the system has finished reorganizing. When anticipation becomes constant, it turns into surveillance, and surveillance freezes quantum systems. Monitoring does the same thing. Tracking progress, watching timelines, comparing current conditions to expected outcomes. These behaviors keep the wave function from collapsing. They reinforce the existing configuration, even when that configuration is already unstable and ready to change. This is the paradox that confuses people most. The very focus that built momentum early becomes the obstruction at the final stage. Nothing has gone wrong. The tool is simply being used past its window of effectiveness. In physics, this is not considered a failure of the system. It is considered a predictable outcome of overmeasurement. The system is doing exactly what the laws describe. The problem is not resistance. The problem is interference. In lived terms, interference feels like being so close that the distance becomes unbearable. It feels like exhaustion without cause. It feels like progress without payoff. It feels like effort that no longer moves anything. That sensation is not imaginary. It is the subjective experience of holding a quantum state in suspension. What makes this especially difficult is that the system does not warn you when the threshold is crossed. There is no announcement that says, "From this point forward, stop pushing." You only feel the symptoms. And because those symptoms resemble failure, fatigue, frustration, stagnation, most people respond by doubling down. They focus harder. They visualize more. They check more frequently. And in doing so, they intensify the very mechanism that holds the outcome back. The Quantum Zeno Effect explains why this spiral feels so cruel. The system is not punishing effort. It is responding lawfully to attention. Continuous observation communicates instability. It tells the system that the observer is not ready for collapse, even if consciously they want it desperately. This is why release is not optional at the final stage. It is structural. It is not a spiritual preference. It is a physical requirement. When observation stops, the system is allowed to do what it was already prepared to do. The wave collapses, the outcome stabilizes, reality shifts without force. Understanding this removes self-blame. You are not failing to manifest. You are not blocked by some external force. You are experiencing a known effect of attention applied at the wrong phase of the process. Once you recognize this, the solution is no longer mysterious. It is precise withdrawal measurement. Stop checking, stop monitoring, stop leaning forward. Not because you don't care, but because you care enough to let the system finish. This is the moment where mastery replaces effort, where trust replaces control, where the final stage is completed not by doing more, but by doing less strategically, deliberately, and with full understanding of why it works. The system does not need encouragement anymore. It needs space. And when that space is given, change is no longer something you chase. It becomes something that happens. Creation does not happen in a single motion. It unfolds in two distinct phases, governed by different laws, requiring different behaviors, and punished by different kinds of interference. Most confusion, exhaustion, and self-doubt arise because people try to complete the second phase using tools that only work in the first. The first phase can be called sculpting potential. The second phase is allowing collapse. They are not interchangeable. Mastery comes from knowing when one ends and the other begins. In the beginning, nothing is fixed. Reality exists as malleable potential, unformed, uncommitted, diffuse. At this stage, attention is not intrusive, it is formative. Focus gives shape. Intention provides direction. Emotion supplies charge. Visualization organizes probability. This is the phase where effort works. When you visualize an outcome, you are not pretending. You are training perception to recognize a specific pattern and feed energy into it. When you focus repeatedly, you stabilize that pattern. When emotion aligns with the vision, the pattern gains density. When intention is consistent, competing possibilities fall away. In practical terms, this is where clarity matters. Repetition helps emotional congruence, accelerates results. Discipline produces alignment. This is why early momentum feels empowering. Every action seems to reinforce the direction. You feel productive. You feel involved. You feel like you are doing something and the system responds positively. Energetically, you are shaping the wave. Psychologically, you are training expectation. Physically, you are reorganizing behavior and environment. This is the 91%. And most teachings stop here. What is rarely explained is that sculpting has a saturation point. At a certain threshold, the system is no longer asking for more definition. The outcome is already coherent. The probability field is already organized. The future state is no longer vague. At this point, the system becomes sensitive. What used to stabilize now constrains. What used to empower now interferes. What used to create now delays. This is the wall people hit without understanding why. They think the problem is insufficient effort when the real issue is excess interaction. Collapse is not built. It is permitted. In physics, a quantum system transitions from potential to actuality, not when it is pushed harder, but when observation relaxes. The wave collapses into a single outcome only when it is no longer being constantly measured. In lived experience, this is where most people fail, not because they lack discipline, but because they refuse to disengage. The same tools that built the first 91% now do the opposite. Visualization becomes rehearsal of absence, focus becomes fixation, emotional alignment becomes emotional monitoring, intention becomes control. Each act of checking reinforces the current state by asking reality to report instead of resolve. This is subtle, and that is why it is so dangerous. The system is delicate here. It is unstable in the productive sense, ready to reorganize. But delicate systems do not respond to force. They respond to permission. Imagine trying to help a soap bubble form by touching it repeatedly. Every touch collapses it. The bubble does not need encouragement. It needs space. This is the same principle. At the final stage, effort does not translate into momentum. It translates into observation density. You are no longer shaping the future. You are interrogating the present. Every question of "is it here yet?" is a measurement. Every scan for evidence is a measurement. Every emotional check-in is a measurement. And continuous measurement freezes transition. This is why people feel paradoxically stuck when they are closest. The system is ready, but it cannot move under surveillance. The moment demands withdrawal, not engagement, not apathy, not giving up, but strategic non-interference. Completion is fragile. Because it is emergent. It arises spontaneously when conditions are right. It cannot be forced into existence because it is not additive, it is subtractive. Something must stop for something else to occur. What must stop is excessive attention. This is why surrender is not weakness at this stage. It is technical accuracy. It is understanding that the laws governing emergence are different from the laws governing construction. Those who cross this threshold successfully often say the same thing without knowing why it is true. It happened when I stopped trying. They did not stop caring. They stopped interfering. The true skill is not visualization, affirmation, or discipline. Those are tools. The real mastery is recognizing which phase you are in. If the outcome is unclear, sculpt. If the outcome is coherent but absent, release. Most people never complete the second instruction because it feels counterintuitive, irresponsible, or frightening. Letting go feels like loss of control, but in reality, it is a transfer of control from conscious manipulation to systemic resolution. The final stage does not reward intensity. It rewards restraint. And once you understand this, exhaustion stops being a mystery. Frustration stops being a verdict. Almost there stops being a curse. It becomes a signal. The work is done. The system is ready. Now stop touching it. That is how collapse occurs. That is how creation completes. And that is why the last step is always quieter than the first. The quantum lock is the most accurate metaphor for what happens at the threshold, where almost everyone stalls, not because they are unprepared, but because they misunderstand the nature of what remains. A wall suggests opposition. A ceiling suggests limitation. A lock suggests neither. A lock assumes readiness. It assumes compatibility. It assumes that entry is permitted, but only under precise conditions. By the time someone encounters what feels like the 91% wall, the truth is that it is no longer a wall at all. It is a lock with most of its tumblers already aligned. Those tumblers represent effort already spent, lessons, already integrated behaviors, already corrected emotional patterns, already stabilized, and internal coherence already achieved. Each tumbler was not aligned by wishful thinking, but by friction. Discipline aligned some. Loss aligned others. Discomfort aligned many. Repetition, self-confrontation, restraint, and endurance each played a role. That is why the person standing here feels tired in a very specific way. Not lost, not confused, but exhausted from precision. This is the exhaustion of someone who has already done the work, not someone avoiding it. 91 tumblers do not align by accident. They align because pressure was applied at the correct stages with the correct tools in the correct order. Earlier in the process, pressure was not only useful, it was required. Without pressure, the tumblers would never have moved. Without force, intention would have remained abstract. Without effort, potential would have stayed diffuse. This is why pushing worked before. This is why striving produced results. This is why focus accelerated change. But locks are not opened by cumulative force. They are opened by sequence and release. Once enough tumblers are aligned, the mechanism changes its sensitivity. What once responded to pressure now resists it. The mistake most people make at this stage is assuming continuity of rules, that if effort worked yesterday, it must work today. They respond to resistance by doubling down, not realizing that resistance is no longer opposition, but feedback. The lock is not saying try harder. It is saying stop. This is counterintuitive to a mind trained on achievement, productivity, and cause-effect linearity. The mind interprets slowing down as negligence, disengagement, as risk, and release as loss of control. But the lock does not interpret reality through effort. It interprets it through alignment. The final tumblers are not waiting for strength. They are waiting for absence of strain. Anyone who has ever picked a physical lock understands this instinctively. You do not shove the key deeper. You ease off. You soften your grip. You reduce torque. You let the pins settle into place on their own. The moment you stop forcing, the lock turns almost by itself. The same principle governs this threshold. At 91%, the system is already coherent. The future state is already defined. The remaining gap is not informational. It is interference-based. What blocks completion is not lack of energy, but excess attention. Not insufficient desire, but over-involvement. Pressure at this stage introduces micro-distortions. Constant checking bends the key. Emotional leaning warps the mechanism. Anticipation adds noise. Monitoring reality for confirmation locks reality into its current state by demanding updates instead of allowing transition. This is why people feel cursed by almost. They are not being denied. They are being held in suspension by their own engagement. The struggle they experience here is not a sign that something is wrong with them. It is a sign that they are misapplying the correct behavior outside its valid phase. Earlier, attention created structure. Now, attention freezes it. Earlier, effort generated momentum. Now, effort jams the final tumblers. This is the cruel elegance of the lock. It punishes competence when competence refuses to adapt. The lock does not respond to ego desperation or reassurance. It responds to neutrality. It responds to stillness. It responds to trust, not as belief, but as behavioral restraint. This is why the final instruction feels irrational. Stop trying sounds like failure to someone whose identity is built on perseverance. Let go sounds irresponsible to someone whose survival depended on vigilance. Do nothing sounds like collapse to someone who equates value with action, but the lock does not care about narratives. It cares about conditions, and the condition required now is absence of pressure. This does not mean passivity in life. It does not mean abandoning responsibility. It means withdrawing manipulative attention from the outcome itself. Living continues. Action continues. Engagement with the present continues. What stops is the hovering over the result, the constant mental reaching forward, the emotional leaning into the future, the repetitive scanning for evidence. These behaviors were useful earlier because the system was undefined. Now they are harmful because the system is defined but uncollapsed. The lock needs silence to finish its work. This is why so many breakthroughs occur when people are distracted, relaxed, or no longer trying to make it happen. Not because effort was wrong, but because effort finally stepped aside. The final turn of the lock is quiet. There is no explosion, no dramatic confirmation. Often there is surprise. I wasn't even thinking about it anymore. That is not coincidence. That is mechanics. The lock turned because nothing was pushing against it. Understanding this reframes everything about the final stage. Frustration becomes data. Exhaustion becomes confirmation. The feeling of being done but not arrived becomes a signal, not a sentence. It means the key is correct. It means the lock is compatible. It means entry is allowed. The only remaining instruction is restraint. Stop applying force to a mechanism that no longer responds to force. Stop demanding proof from a system that needs privacy to resolve. Stop gripping the key. Let the tumblers fall. The lock does not open to those who want it most. It opens to those who know when to stop wanting and allow turning to occur. Everyday behavior becomes interference, not because it is negative, unfaithful, or poorly intentioned, but because it functions as measurement. In physics, measurement is not passive observation. It is interaction. The moment a system is measured, it is forced to declare a state. Possibility collapses into report. What most people fail to understand is that modern life is saturated with measurement rituals that feel normal, responsible, even intelligent, yet function energetically as constant interruptions of emergence. Checking messages to see if someone replied, opening a banking app to see if money has arrived, refreshing an inbox. Watching View counts notifications. Analytics, looking for signs. Synchronicities. Confirmations, reassurance. None of these behaviors are inherently wrong. They are learned responses rooted in survival pattern, recognition, and control conditioning. But when translated into the mechanics of creation, they become the very actions that prevent transition. Each check is a question posed to reality. Has it changed yet? And every time that question is asked, reality is required to answer from its current state. The system is not being allowed to reorganize, it is being asked to report. This is the subtlety most people miss. They believe the problem is doubt. It is not. Doubt is an internal belief state. Interference is behavioral. You can believe fully and still interfere constantly. You can trust intellectually and still overmeasure emotionally. The emotional tone beneath these micro-actions is almost always the same, even when masked by hope or excitement. Not yet. Not yet arrived. Not yet resolved. Not yet here. This tone is not dramatic, but it is consistent. And consistency matters more than intensity. The nervous system reads repetition, not declarations. So even when someone says, "I trust," but repeatedly checks, scans, refreshes, and monitors, the dominant signal being broadcast is still absence in progress. That signal stabilizes the current state. It tells the system that the present configuration is being referenced, validated, and reinforced. Over time, this creates a loop. Checking produces confirmation of not yet, which produces more checking. The loop feels like anticipation, but it functions like suspension. This is why people feel trapped in almosts. They are not failing to create, they are preventing collapse. Importantly, this is not conscious sabotage. No one wakes up intending to block their own manifestation. This behavior is conditioned survival intelligence carried into a domain where it no longer applies. In earlier environments, monitoring was safety. Checking meant catching danger early. Scanning meant resource protection. Anticipation meant preparedness. These behaviors were rewarded by reality. So the nervous system learned vigilance equals survival. When people begin creating intentionally, that same nervous system applies the same rules. It checks because it cares. It monitors because it wants success. It seeks signs because it wants orientation. There is no malice here. There is no spiritual flaw. There is only a mismatch between conditioning and context. Creation at the final stage does not reward vigilance. It rewards non-interference. That feels threatening to a system trained to equate control with safety. Letting go of checking feels like negligence. Not monitoring feels like risk. Silence feels like vulnerability. So the system resists release even when effort has already done its job. This is why telling people to just trust rarely works. Trust is not a thought. It is a behavior. Trust is demonstrated by reduced measurement, reduced checking, reduced interrogation of the present. The moment checking stops, anxiety often spikes briefly because the nervous system believes it is abandoning responsibility. But that spike is not danger. It is withdrawal from a habit. On the other side of that withdrawal is movement. Because the system finally has space to reorganize without being asked to report every second. Seeking signs is a particularly deceptive form of interference because it feels spiritual. It feels aligned. It feels like listening, but energetically, it is still measurement. It is still asking reality to perform on demand. It is still orienting consciousness around confirmation rather than completion. The system does not respond by accelerating. It responds by stabilizing. This is why signs often increase without resolution. More synchronicities, more hints, more partials, more almosts. The system is communicating but not collapsing because it is still being watched. Over-observation does not come from lack of faith. It comes from excess attachment to outcome visibility. People want to witness the moment it happens. They want to be there when it turns. But emergence rarely happens under a spotlight. It happens when attention is elsewhere. This is not punishment, it is mechanics. Like sleep digestion or healing, some processes complete only when conscious control disengages. You cannot will yourself asleep by watching yourself sleep. You cannot digest faster by monitoring your stomach. You cannot heal by reopening the wound to check progress. Creation follows the same logic. And because society trains people to measure everything constantly, this interference is widespread. Notifications, metrics, dashboards, updates. Life becomes a series of refreshes. That habit bleeds into inner work. The solution is not abstinence from all checking forever. It is phase awareness. Early phases tolerate and even benefit from observation. Late phases do not. The inability to cross the final threshold is not evidence of unworthiness or insufficiency. It is evidence of readiness combined with misapplied vigilance. Once this is understood, the dynamic shifts from self-criticism to calibration. The instruction becomes simple but difficult. Reduce contact. Stop asking the system to show itself. Let it move without supervision. This is not giving up. This is precision. Interference ends not when belief increases, but when measurement decreases. And when measurement decreases, reality is finally free to do what it was already prepared to do. There are 3 indicators that appear with such consistency at the threshold that they can no longer be dismissed as coincidence, pathology, or personal failure. When they show up together, they are not warning signs, they are confirmation signals. They indicate proximity, not deficiency. The first indicator is the flood of almosts and near-miss synchronicities. This is the stage where reality seems to hover just short of resolution. You meet the right person at the wrong time. The opportunity appears but does not finalize. The message is drafted but not sent. The door opens halfway and pauses. Synchronicities increase but outcomes stall. This pattern is deeply frustrating because it mimics success without delivering it. Most people interpret this as mockery or blockage. In truth, it is evidence that the probability field is highly organized. Randomness has decreased. Coherence has increased. Reality is no longer chaotic. It is precise. Near misses do not happen in disordered systems. They happen in systems that are tightly aligned, but not yet collapsed. Each almost is not a tease, it is a diagnostic readout, showing that the correct future is already selected, just not finalized. The system is circling the same configuration repeatedly because it is ready to lock in, but is still under observation. This is why signs multiply here. The system is responsive, it is listening, but it is not resolving because it is still being checked. The second indicator is quantum fatigue, a deep, unexplained exhaustion that does not correlate with physical effort, emotional drama, or mental overwork. This fatigue is different from burnout. Burnout feels frantic and depleted. Quantum fatigue feels heavy, slow, and strangely quiet. Motivation drops not because of depression, but because the drive to push simply disappears. The body feels older than it should. The nervous system wants stillness. Sleep may increase, yet rest does not feel fully restorative. This fatigue is not a signal to try harder. It is a signal that effort has completed its role. The system is no longer designed to be driven forward by force. Continuing to push here drains energy because the system is resisting interference. The exhaustion is not punishment, it is feedback. It is the body and nervous system communicating that the phase has shifted. The work of sculpting is done. Any additional effort is now friction, not fuel. Many people misinterpret this fatigue as laziness, loss of passion, or spiritual failure, and respond by forcing themselves back into intensity. That response prolongs the fatigue. The correct interpretation is that the system is asking for disengagement, not motivation. The third indicator is the roar of the old reality intensifying before collapse. Just before transition, the existing structure often becomes louder, more demanding, more chaotic, or more emotionally charged. Old patterns resurface. Old responsibilities escalate. Old relationships pull harder. Problems that seem dormant suddenly require attention. This is not regression. It is pressure equalization. When a system is about to reorganize, the existing configuration attempts to stabilize itself. It does this by increasing signal volume. The old reality does not want to disappear quietly. It wants validation. This is why things feel busier, noisier, or more urgent right before a shift. Many people panic here, believing they are being pulled backward. In fact, they are witnessing the last surge of a structure that is losing dominance. The mistake is engaging with this roar as if it requires resolution. It does not. Engagement feeds it. Attention stabilizes it. The correct response is neutrality. The old reality is not asking for fixing. It is reacting to imminent irrelevance. Together, these three indicators form a pattern that is unmistakable once understood. Almosts mean alignment is complete. Fatigue means effort is no longer required. Noise means the old system is destabilizing. None of these are failures. All of them are proximity markers. The reason they feel so uncomfortable is because they contradict everything we are taught about progress. We are taught that clarity feels energizing, that success feels exciting, that breakthroughs feel triumphant. In reality, the final stage feels anticlimactic, heavy, and strangely empty. That emptiness is not loss, it is capacity. The system is clearing space. When these signals appear, the instruction is not to fix, push, analyze, or optimize. The instruction is to reduce measurement. Stop interpreting almost as absence. Stop fighting fatigue as weakness. Stop responding to noise as command. These signals mean the system is ready, and readiness does not require effort. It requires restraint. When restraint is applied, collapse happens quickly and quietly, not with fireworks, but with inevitability. The missing 9% must be defined with absolute precision, because misunderstanding it is the reason the process stalls. It is not more action. It is not stronger visualization. It is not emotional amplification, affirmation loops, or intensified belief. The missing 9% is allowance. Allowance is not passive resignation, and it is not apathy. It is the deliberate withdrawal of control at the exact moment when control becomes interference. This is where most people fail, not because they lack discipline, but because they apply discipline past its usefulness. Up to this point, effort was productive. Focus sculpted the field. Emotion charged the blueprint. Intention narrowed probability. But at completion, those same behaviors cross a threshold and invert their function. They stop building and start constraining. Allowance is the recognition that the structure is already complete and that continued manipulation destabilizes it. The distinction that matters here is subtle but decisive, holding the feeling state versus fixating on physical proof. Holding the feeling state means remaining internally coherent with the reality that has already been selected. Peace, certainty, gratitude, steadiness without demanding that the external world immediately validate it. Fixation on physical proof, by contrast, is an insistence on confirmation. It is the repeated checking, scanning, waiting and bracing that says beneath the surface, it is not here yet. That emotional undertone is not neutral, it is measurement. And measurement at this stage suspends resolution. Allowance does not abandon the feeling. It protects it by removing the pressure of outcome monitoring. This is why completion happens in stillness, not effort. Stillness is not emptiness, it is non-interference. It is the state in which the system is finally left alone long enough to resolve itself. When you stop reaching forward, the future moves toward you. When you stop asking whether it is done, the system answers by finishing. This is the paradigm shift from control to trust, and it is not philosophical, it is mechanical. Trust here does not mean blind faith or positive thinking. It means confidence in process rather than supervision of outcome. It is knowing that the work phase has ended and that any additional input will be treated as noise. The mind resists this because identity has been built around doing, striving, managing, and improving. Allowance feels like irresponsibility to a control-based nervous system. In reality, it is precision. It is knowing exactly when not to act. The missing 9% is the moment you stop trying to open the door and allow the lock to turn on its own. Allowance requires rewiring the instinct that equates vigilance with safety. Most people believe that if they stop watching, monitoring, adjusting, and correcting, something will go wrong. This belief is not spiritual. It is neurological. It comes from survival conditioning where attention was used to prevent loss. In creation, however, attention at the wrong phase does not protect it, delays. The final stage is not fragile because it lacks power. It is fragile because it is complete. Any further manipulation introduces contradiction. Think of it like letting concrete cure. In the early stages, stirring is helpful. Later stirring destroys structural integrity. Allowance is the discipline of restraint. It is the refusal to interfere with what no longer needs help. This is why people experience anxiety at the 91% mark. Anxiety is not a sign of danger. It is the nervous system reacting to the withdrawal of control. The mind panics when it can no longer do anything. It searches for tasks, rituals, signs, affirmations, anything to reassert relevance. But the most relevant action now is inaction. This does not mean disengaging from life. It means disengaging from outcome surveillance. You continue living, working, relating, creating, but you stop checking whether the universe is keeping up. The internal shift is subtle but profound. Instead of leaning forward energetically, you lean back. Instead of asking when you occupy now, instead of waiting, you settle. This settling is not boredom, it is stabilization. It is the nervous system standing down from high alert. When the system relaxes, coherence increases. When coherence increases, collapse completes. This is why people often receive manifestations when they are busy, distracted, or no longer thinking about the desire. It is not coincidence. It is the absence of measurement. Allowance creates privacy for reality to finish assembling. There is also an emotional component that must be clarified. Many people believe they are holding the feeling state when they are actually holding anticipation. Anticipation is forward-leaning. It is energized by expectation and tension. The feeling state of completion, by contrast, is quiet. It is settled. It feels like relief, not excitement. It feels like certainty, not hope. Excitement belongs earlier in the process. Calm belongs at the end. This is why chasing high vibration backfires at this stage. Calm does not feel dramatic, so the mind assumes something is wrong. In truth, calm is the signature of arrival. Allowance feels anticlimactic because the nervous system is no longer braced. There is no rush, no urgency, no countdown. That absence is the signal that the system is free to resolve. Another reason allowance is resisted is because it removes leverage. When you stop watching, you surrender the illusion of influence. But influence has already been exercised. The blueprint has been set. At this point, continued influence is micromanagement. Allowance is respect for timing that is no longer yours to manage. It is understanding that collapse has its own rhythm and that your role has ended. This is why people often say it happened when I finally gave up. The language is misleading. They did not give up on the desire. They gave up on controlling the delivery. That distinction matters. Giving up on desire collapses the field. Giving up on control completes it. The missing 9% is also where identity dissolves. If you define yourself as someone striving toward a future state, completion threatens that identity. Allowance requires becoming someone who assumes arrival without proof. That is uncomfortable. It feels like standing on air, but that discomfort is temporary. Once the nervous system acclimates, trust replaces tension, and trust is not belief. It is embodied neutrality. You are no longer scanning for confirmation because you no longer need reassurance. That inner sufficiency is the final alignment. From the outside, allowance looks like detachment. Internally, it feels like sovereignty. You are no longer negotiating with reality. You are no longer persuading it. You are no longer monitoring it. You are allowing it. And allowance is not empty space. It is invitation. It is the open hand instead of the clenched fist. It is the silence that lets the echo arrive. The missing 9% completes not because you push through it, but because you stop blocking it. When effort ends, motion resumes. When observation stops, change occurs. When control dissolves, reality clicks into place. The observation fast is the most direct and practical intervention for dissolving the 91% quantum wall because it targets the exact mechanism that created it. It is not a mindset, a belief, or an affirmation practice. It is a behavioral suspension. Very simply defined, an observation fast is a deliberate, time-bound decision to stop seeking evidence of your desired outcome in the physical world. For a set period, typically 24 to 72 hours, you withdraw from checking, monitoring, scanning, refreshing, and measuring anything related to the manifestation you are waiting for. You do not check the inbox for the message, the account for the deposit, the app for the notification, or the environment for signs. You are not pretending the desire no longer exists. You are removing yourself as an observer from the system long enough for it to resolve. From a physics perspective, this works because it starves the Quantum Zeno Effect. The Zeno Effect requires continuous measurement to freeze a system in place. Remove the measurement and the system resumes its natural evolution. The observation fast is not about positive thinking. It is about stopping interference. Every time you look for proof with the emotional undertone of not yet, you collapse the wave function back into its incomplete state. Every time you refrain from looking, you allow the system privacy. Reality, like any process, finishes more efficiently when it is not being watched with pressure. The universe does not need encouragement at this stage. It needs space. What makes the observation fast difficult is not discipline but identity. Many people unconsciously believe that vigilance equals responsibility. If they stop watching, they fear they will miss the moment, lose control, or allow something to slip through their fingers. This fear is not intuitive wisdom. It is conditioned control. It is the same conditioning that equates anxiety with preparedness. In the context of manifestation, this conditioning becomes counterproductive. The observation fast challenges the nervous system directly by removing its primary coping mechanism, monitoring. That is why resistance appears almost immediately. Discomfort during an observation fast should be understood correctly. It is not intuition warning you of danger. It is withdrawal from control. The nervous system has been trained to regulate uncertainty through checking. When checking stops, the system spikes, searching for relief. Thoughts like, what if it already happened and I miss it? What if I need to act now or this feels irresponsible are not guidance. They are symptoms. They indicate that the habit of over-observation has been active long enough to feel necessary. Just as the body reacts when caffeine, sugar, or stimulation is removed, the mind reacts when surveillance ends. The discomfort does not mean something is wrong. It means the fast is working. During the observation fast, nothing else is required of you. You do not need to distract yourself aggressively or suppress thoughts. You simply notice urges to check and do not act on them. Each resisted urge is not a test of willpower, but a removal of measurement. You are closing the lab door and leaving the experiment alone. When attention naturally drifts back to the desire, you acknowledge it without following it into action. The key is behavioral interruption, not mental perfection. The universe does not require silence of thought. It requires absence of interference. It is important to clarify that an observation fast is not avoidance. You are not refusing opportunities, ignoring responsibilities, or disengaging from life. You answer emails that arrive. You take action when action is presented to you. What you stop doing is hunting. You stop initiating contact with the outcome. You stop leaning forward energetically. This distinction matters because many people fear passivity. The observation fast is not passivity. It is restraint. It is the discipline of knowing when your role is complete. As the fast continues, something predictable happens. The urge to check weakens. The internal noise lowers. The emotional charge around the desire softens. This is not loss of desire. It is decoupling. The desire remains, but the tension around it dissolves. This decoupling restores coherence to the system. When coherence returns, collapse becomes inevitable. Many people report that outcomes arrive either during the fast or immediately after it ends. Not because the fast forced reality, but because interference stopped. The observation fast restores a natural law that has been overridden by habit. Change does not require constant supervision. Growth does not need to be watched to occur. Seeds germinate underground. Systems resolve in silence. The fast is a reminder that your attention is powerful not only in where you place it, but in where you withdraw it. By choosing not to observe, you are not abandoning creation. You are completing it. Extending the observation fast deeper reveals why this practice is not merely a temporary technique, but a recalibration of your relationship with reality itself. When you remove yourself as an observer, you are not becoming passive. You are restoring the correct division of labor between consciousness and the field. Your role is to generate the blueprint. The field's role is to execute it. The wall appears when consciousness refuses to relinquish execution and insists on supervising construction. The observation fast forcibly corrects that imbalance. It returns authority to the system that actually performs collapse. This is why the fast often produces a subtle but unmistakable shift in internal posture. You begin to feel less leaned forward, less braced. The body relaxes not because the desire has vanished, but because the fight against uncertainty has ended. At a neurological level, this shift is significant. Constant checking keeps the brain in a prediction error loop. Each time you look for evidence and do not find it, the brain flags a mismatch between expectation and reality. That mismatch produces cortisol and adrenaline. Over time, this becomes quantum fatigue, a body exhausted not by effort, but by unresolved anticipation. The observation fast interrupts this loop. Without repeated prediction errors, the nervous system exits alert mode. When the nervous system stabilizes, your internal frequency stabilizes. Stability is not stagnation. Stability is coherence. Coherence is what allows systems to reorganize efficiently. Many people misunderstand manifestation as a purely mental or emotional process. In reality, it is deeply somatic. The body must believe the outcome is safe, inevitable, and no longer urgent. Over-observation communicates urgency. It tells the system, "This must happen now or something is wrong." That message creates internal contraction. Contraction prevents reception. The observation fast reverses this message. By not checking, you are telling the system, "Nothing is required from me right now." That signal alone is enough to unlock the final stage. Another layer of resistance often emerges midway through the fast, the fear of irrelevance. If you are not watching, you may feel unnecessary. This reveals an unconscious identity attachment to effort. Many people equate worth with activity. When activity stops, they feel unmoored. The observation fast exposes this belief without argument. It shows you experientially that reality does not collapse because you are important, vigilant, or anxious. It collapses because conditions are aligned. Your worth was never the lever. Alignment was. As the fast progresses, the mind often tries to reassert control through rationalizations. I'm not checking, I'm just being responsible. This is different. I need to know. These justifications are subtle attempts to reintroduce measurement. The protocol remains the same: notice, do not act. Each refusal to re-engage strengthens the release muscle. Over time, release becomes less effortful than control. That is when the wall dissolves completely, not as a dramatic breakthrough, but as a quiet inevitability. It is also common for synchronicities to increase during an observation fast. This can be confusing because synchronicities feel like signs, and signs invite observation. The instruction here is precise: receive without pursuing. Let events come to you without chasing meaning. The moment you turn synchronicity into proof-seeking, you reintroduce measurement. The discipline is to allow resonance without analysis. You acknowledge alignment without extracting reassurance from it. When the fast ends, you do not return to old habits. The fast is not meant to be a pause before resuming surveillance. It is meant to demonstrate conclusively that surveillance was unnecessary. Once you have seen reality move, without your monitoring, trust is no longer theoretical. It is embodied. You may still take inspired action when it arises, but you no longer stalk outcomes. The difference is subtle, but absolute. Action feels clean. Checking feels unnecessary. The deepest function of the observation fast is that it restores humility to the creative process. Not humility as submission, but humility as accuracy. It reminds consciousness of its true power and its true limits. Consciousness initiates. It does not micromanage. When that distinction is honored, creation completes itself with far less friction. The final 9% was never missing effort. It was missing restraint. By the time the observation fast has done its work, the desire often feels strangely neutral. This neutrality is not indifference. It is certainty without tension. It is the state in which outcomes arrive easily because they are no longer being pulled toward you. You are simply standing where they are already headed. The wall disappears not because you broke through it, but because you stopped leaning against it. Understanding release intellectually is not enough because the quantum wall is not held in place by thought alone. It is held in place by the nervous system. Over-observation is not a philosophical mistake. It is a physiological reflex. The body leans forward, the breath shortens, the muscles subtly contract, and the system enters a state of anticipatory vigilance. As long as the body remains in that posture, the mind cannot truly release, no matter how much it understands the theory. This is why embodiment is not optional at the final stage. The shift completes only when release is felt physically, not explained mentally. The nervous system must register safety completion and non-urgency as lived sensations. Without that registration, consciousness continues to transmit measurement signals into the field, even while telling itself it has let go. This is where the completion anchor becomes essential. The anchor is not a symbolic tool. It is a neurological shortcut. It links the state of release to a specific physical trigger, allowing the body to return to that state instantly without analysis. When release is anchored somatically, the system no longer relies on reasoning to exit over observation. It responds automatically. This matters because over-observation often arises faster than conscious thought. You check before you realize you are checking. You tense before you notice tension. A purely intellectual strategy is always one step behind the reflex. A somatic anchor meets the reflex at its own level. The logic of the completion anchor is simple. The nervous system learns through association, not explanation. When a specific physical action is repeatedly paired with the felt state of release, the body treats that action as a command. Touching the anchor becomes equivalent to exhaling deeply. It signals the system to drop vigilance, soften focus, and disengage from outcome surveillance. Over time, this association becomes stronger than the urge to check. The body trusts the anchor more than the habit. The key distinction here is between mental reassurance and somatic certainty. Mental reassurance sounds like, "It's fine, it's coming, I don't need to worry." Somatic certainty feels like grounded stillness with no commentary. The first requires effort to maintain. The second requires none. The completion anchor trains the system to access certainty without thought. When over-observation arises, you do not argue with it. You do not correct it. You interrupt it at the level where it begins the body. Choosing an anchor is less important than charging it correctly. The anchor must be paired with an authentic release state, not an imagined one. This means you first generate release physically. You drop the shoulders. You relax the jaw. You slow the breath. You feel the internal shift from forward-leaning to settled. Only when that state is present do you activate the anchor. The nervous system then links the trigger to the state. Repetition deepens the pathway. Eventually, the trigger alone is enough to restore the state.